Hey everyone, welcome back to BDG Reviews and night 31 of the 31 Days of Horror. I've just come to the conclusion that my cat wants to be a YouTuber, so I'm not even going to try to move him out of the way. I'm just going to try to work around him, because that's kind of like how it's working, because he comes up here every damn time. So, it's night 31. We've finished the 31 Days of Horror. It's been a hell of a ride. Some good movies, a couple of stinkers in there, but all in all, an enjoyable time. So I decided, you know what, we'll finish this off with a bang. I mean, normally I'd just do, like, a Halloween movie, but, you know, I do that every year sort of thing. So this time what I'm doing a complete series overview of Friday the 13th. This is, this is my complete collection. I just have it in a custom case and everything, so don't go looking for that in the store. You're not going to find it. So, we'll start off with Friday the 13th Part 1. People love Friday the 13th Part 1. I get why, but honestly, of all the movies, it's possibly the weakest. It's almost blasphemy to say that, but it is. I mean, essentially what you have, it's your basic run-of-the-mill, like, slasher film. You know, there've been thousands like it. Yeah, it was one of the first, don't get me wrong, and it has a great place in history for that, but what this movie really did was a moment of brilliance that was just a throwaway scene, and that's Jason coming out of the water at the end. It was a complete throwaway. It was a stinger. It was designed just to give one last shock, and that was going to be it. Now, they could have done it many ways. Honestly, like, if they'd had Mrs. Voorhees' headless corpse come out and attack her in the lake, that would have been a stinger as well, but it would have ended, it was still what ended the series. We wouldn't have gotten any more, I'm quite sure of it. But somewhere along the line, someone just thought, you know what, if we have... I don't even know whether it was a conscious thought, but it was like, you know, there's legs in this series, so let's throw in Jason there in the end. And as a result was born, you know, the face of the slasher genre. The kills are great in Part 1. The soundtrack is awesome. I love the Friday the 13th score. All around, it's a fun movie, but it's nothing special. It's just what it is. So we move on to Part 2. Part 2 is kind of like the odd man out in the series, really. Like, yeah, it introduces Jason and everything, and there's some continuity, you know, but it's the first that really kind of goes off the rails continuity-wise. I have no clue when I'm watching Part 2 when it's supposed to take place. Is this, you know, like, what, like a week or is it years? Is it months? I don't know. Like, after the events of Part 1. I don't know. And it's the first in many continuity errors in the Friday the 13th series, mainly just because really everyone's its own entity. What Part 2 did really well is it brought in Jason. It made him scary. Honestly, the Friday the 13th Part 2 Jason is possibly one of the scariest in the series, simply because it's just literally a dude in a sack. You know? I mean, anyone can put a sack on their head. And, I'm not going into plots and everything. Good kills, interesting, like, weapon usages and everything. But again, kind of just more of the same, really. Still good, but, you know, just not, like, perfect, if you will. Then we get to Part 3. Part 3 is where everything kind of turns on its head. Because again, you have this weird continuity. You have no clue when part 3 is supposed to be. Is it supposed to be literally right after the events of part 2? I don't know. No one really knows. I mean, yeah, they drive past like a crime scene. Is that the part 2 crime scene? Or is it just some random crime scene? Who knows? But part 3 adds in some of the most mean-spirited kills in the movie. In the entire series, really. I mean, honestly, it's just like, dude, man, the chick's getting the guy's wallet and she gets shot in the eye with a freaking spear gun. Dude, stop it. Look at this. Yes, he's trying to eat me. I don't know why. I don't know what he thinks he's going to get out of it. I'm not food. You can't eat me. And it starts, and part 3 also starts bringing in, the iconic imagery. The mask, the overall look of Jason. And it's just an all-around kind of like a perfect sequel, really. I mean, it takes what was done in parts 1 and 2, and it runs with it, and it makes, like I said, the face of the slasher genre, and it gives him a face. A hockey masked face, nonetheless, but still a face. And from that, dude, seriously, stop it. Knock it off. From that, history was kind of made, if you will. So we'll move on to part 4. Part 4 is one of my favorite of the... I always kind of break the Friday the 13th up into, like, eras, if you will. You have, like, the Living Jason Era. Well, let's put it this way. You have the pre-era. So you have part 1. You have the Living Jason Era, 2, 3, and 4. You have Zombie Jason, 6, 7, and 8. And then it sort of changes. I'll get to 5 in a minute. Part 4 was, again, it worked its way up with some really mean-spirited kills, which is something like I said, I really appreciate. I like the fact that, Jason's not just, it's not just do-do-do, slit throat, do-do-do, slit throat, it's like, I don't know, everything seems a bit more thought out and a bit more brutal. I mean, hell, the fact that, at the beginning of 4, he, like, slashes a guy's throat with, like, a hacksaw. Not even, like, just, like, a knife or whatever. It's a freaking hacksaw. And just, oh, dude. I love it. I really do. This introduced... Like I said, this was the end of the Living Jason era. So, up until this point, Jason has been human. He's been, like a deformed human. He's been, has like almost like monstrous type strength at times, but nothing really over the top. He was still a living... Really? That's what you're gonna do? He was still a living guy. And this ended Jason, and it ended him with a bang. To this day, part 4 has one of the single best Jason deaths in the series, and it was a fitting end to a beloved monster, if you will. The effects, again, were phenomenal. They were Tom Savini level effects, because they were Tom Savini effects, obviously. And all in all, it was a superior sequel. And everyone thought it was over. Then came along part 5. Part 5 is a movie that gets a lot of hate because there's no Jason in it. Spoiler alert, it's another guy. But Part 5 has become one of my favorites in the entire series. Because, again, for one, the sheer body count. It has the highest body count of any other Friday the 13th, which is awesome. The kills are brutal. You know, like... And mean-spirited to hell. I mean, taking some dude out when he's on the toilet, that's just kinda... It's funny, but it's also just kind of like, oh man, it's like you're going there, you're gonna get him in the toilet. It's like, dude. And it also had a how can I put this? There was an element in part 5 of it didn't matter who you are. Like, anyone could die. There were no rules for who got killed in part 5. You know, literally, you have like it's called like the New Wave girl or whatever, and she's like, she hasn't done anything wrong in the entire movie. She was just there. There was no reason for her to die, but they kill her anyways. It's awesome. It really is. I like the fact that they went with a different killer, but I like that they still threw back to the Jason mythos. It worked. It was a one-off. We all know it was a one-off, but honestly, it was a fun one-off. Then we move into the Undead Jason era. This one was always... I always have kind of a love-hate with this, because Part 6 is one of the funnest Friday the 13th movies ever made. I could watch that movie anytime. It's a good introduction for, like, young horror fans or just getting into stuff. It works, but looking at it as a movie and as a Friday the 13th, it falls short. It really does. There isn't that level of brutality. There isn't really that level of threat. You have all these kids at this camp, which, for once, I think is a really good idea, you know, but the fact of the matter is they never really seem to be in jeopardy. You know, you never think that these kids are going to end up dead. And they don't. But it was a good way to tie up the Tommy Jarvis storyline. And it worked. You know, he gets a win over Jason and guess moves on with his life or whatever. It worked. And like I said, it was the beginning of the Undead Jason era. Which takes us on to Part 7. Which was famously one of the most neutered Friday the 13ths in history. From what we've heard, there's like an entire other cut of the film that's been lost that had all this gore and all this great stuff, and it would have been, I gotta say, if what we hear about what it was supposed to be is actually the case, I think it would have been the quintessential Friday the 13th movie. Just saying. It brought in Kane Hodder. And Kane Hodder just knew how to play Jason. He really did. Posing, physique, and everything, and just had everything down. The makeup in Part 7 is phenomenal. Damn, Jason looks like a frickin' from like Lucio Fulci's Zombie. You know, he looks like one of them, and it's awesome. Every part about Part 7 is a win, except for some of the non-Jason characters. Essentially, the cannon fodder. You know, you don't care. They're cannon fodder. That's what they are. Some good kills, some inventive kills, but we should have seen more. And the fact that we haven't is like a travesty. So we move on to Part 8. Yeah, Part 8. I'm gonna leave out the fact that, I'm not gonna go into detail about it, but like how they somehow make it from a lake into like the frickin' ocean and to New York. I don't know. It makes no sense. It just happens. Plot. This was, again, kind of one of the weaker ones. And I mean, and it wasn't really that anything in particular didn't work. It's just, the makeup was subpar. Honestly, the look of Jason was not good. The kills were sort of inventive. I mean, but again, it felt neutered. You didn't see enough. And the ending was just stupid. I mean, I don't know how drowning Jason in like toxic waste is gonna... I don't know. Screw it. Less at least said about that one, the better. So that moves us on to Jason Goes to Hell. Jason Goes to Hell is a movie that is very, very divisive. Some people love it, some people hate it. I always used to hate it. I've taken a bit of a liking to it as I've gotten older, but it's not great. The first, 15 minutes is perfect Friday the 13th. And then they blow up Jason. And we don't see him again till the end. The design of Jason in Jason Goes to Hell is great. I love the look, the sunken in mask and everything. It really works. And a lot of the kills, again, feel very mean-spirited. And I like that. And if you see the director's cut, they don't shy away, which is good. And, of course, the infamous ending that sets us up for a movie that would take, I think, 15, 20 years to get made after, with Freddy's glove coming out and pulling down the mask. Is what it is, right? It's one of the weaker entries, but you still gotta... If you're a fan, you gotta see it. That moves us on to Jason X, which is actually probably one of the most fun in the series. And the reason it's one of the most fun is it doesn't take itself seriously at all, but it doesn't shy away from the gore. Part 6 kind of shied away from the gore and everything, and it didn't take itself too seriously. But it felt kind of neutered, where Jason X feels like, it was just, what, let's get together, let's make a Friday the 13th movie, let's have some fun, let's send him into space. And to this day, you cannot convince me that Uber Jason isn't badass, because he looks damn badass. So, that takes us through the main series.